Hello, everybody. Scott Howarth here with Perry Public Library, and we are so glad that you're joining us for this really unique evening, virtual evening with Alan Hlad, silent H. Alan is with us tonight. He's an international and U.S. Today best-selling author of The Long Flight Home, a very fascinating book. He's a member of the Historical Novel Society, the Literary Cleveland and Akron Writers Group. Alan's a corporate executive turned writer. He lives here in Ohio with his wife and children, a golden retriever. He has the proud distinction of owning the world's most persistent hat. I'm very curious to find out about that. And you can find him online at alanhlad.com. He has a Facebook and Instagram. Before I turn that over to him, I just want you to know from our library, we are open for business, so please do come down and see us here at Perry Public Library. We are requiring masks to be worn for the time being. We do have masks here. If you happen to walk in and forget yours, that's not a problem. We have hand sanitizer throughout the building as that's needed as well. We also have the curbside pickup. So if you prefer to pick up your books, you can call in. We'll check them out and bring them out to the front porch for you, and you can pick it up according to your last name. Check us out on our website, perrypubliclibrary.org, for more virtual programs and lots of great information. I want to turn this over now, not take too much time from Alan. So it is all yours.
Well, thank you, Scott. And thank you to Peggy for inviting me to join you this evening. It's a pleasure to join the Perry Library to discuss The Long Flight Home. The older I get, the more I'm convinced that time is one of our most important commodities. And I'm grateful that you've chosen to spend some of your precious time this evening to discuss The Long Flight Home. A little bit about me. Scott mentioned a little bit about my background. I didn't start out as a writer. I'm originally from Wheeling, West Virginia, so I'm not from Ohio. I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia area, and went to Bowling Green State University here in Ohio, and stayed in Ohio for most of my business career. I spent most of my career in insurance. I was an executive for a large insurance company for a number of years, and you're probably wondering why, how someone goes from business to writing. And it really started as a child. My parents, I'm very fortunate to have parents that instilled in me a passion for reading and writing. I had a mother that was very artistic, read every day, and always took me to the library to get books. That was one of my fondest memories, is going to the library and getting stacks of books and bringing them home. And that was how I started my passion for reading. And she also encouraged me to write at an early age. She would encourage me to write stories, and it just stuck with me. And throughout my college days, as well as working in business, I would spend time in hotels and airplanes, scribbling little stories, just things that I was motivated to write about. I just had this passion to write because I always dreamed of someday becoming a writer. So during my business career, I wrote a lot of business magazines and articles and things like that to get my experience in writing. But I always had a passion to someday I'm going to write a novel. So and to combine that, I was always fascinated with history. And I'll tell you a little bit about what inspired me to write The Long Flight Home. I initially embarked on writing, I was going to write something about World War II. And initially I thought it would be something involving American pilots joining the RAF. And while I was conducting research for a potential book, I came across a very interesting newspaper article that was published in the New York Times. It was actually published all over the world. It was about a pigeon that was found in a Surrey, England chimney in 2012. There was a man that was renovating his chimney, actually renovating his old house in Surrey, England, and he discovered the remains of a pigeon in his chimney. And attached to its leg was a capsule. And inside the capsule was a coded message from 1940, a military message. And it's one that has been yet to be deciphered by code breakers around the world, including Bletchley Park, the curators of Bletchley Park, as well as Britain's government Communication Headquarters, GCHQ. So I'm like, wow, these are some of the world's top cryptologists. And, you know, Bletchley cracked the Nazi Enigma code machine back in World War II and changed the tide of the war. Yet today, the best cryptologists cannot decipher this pigeon message. So I couldn't get it out of my head. So that's where I started. I started with the end in mind. And that's what inspired me to write The Long Flight Home. Since then, the book has been published. It's now been published in 10 languages. It's been a bestseller, I think, in 4 different international markets, not including the US, where it was a USA Today bestseller, which I'm very grateful for my publishing house, Kensington, and my agent, Mark Gottlieb. I can't thank them enough for helping me bring this story to life. So that's a little bit about what inspired me to write the story. I could tell you a little bit, talk a little bit about the use of pigeons in World War II. And what struck me about this pigeon discovery was I didn't know pigeons were used during World War II. I knew that they were used during World War I extensively in the trench warfare. But World War II, I thought, you know, with communications, and I was shocked to find that British services used over 200,000 pigeons during World War II, which I was just beyond shocked. I couldn't believe it. And including 16,000 pigeons that were parachuted into German-occupied France to help get intelligence from the French resistance, which I was amazed by that too. And just to set a little bit of setting about the story, this story takes place in the early stages of the war, 1940, the winter of 1939 and 1940. And at that time, France was conquered by Germany in 46 days, I believe. And at the time, the US was still declaring neutrality. And Britain was pretty much alone, with exception of some, you know, Canada and Australia. So they were really in a bind. And at that time, they really believed that there was going to be an imminent German invasion of Britain. And also at the time, the London Blitz was taking place. And every night, the city was being bombed by the Luftwaffe. And it was a very desperate time for the British. And it's interesting to think that, you know, what was Britain thinking? Well, how are they going to save Britain? What were they thinking to do in order to get any insight on when the Germans were going to invade? And that insight was coming from Operation Columba, which was a real live mission where they parachuted 16,000 pigeons into German-occupied France and the Netherlands to try to get intelligence on where the troops were moving. So it was such a desperate time and something I didn't know about. I was really surprised to learn all this information during my research, and which was a lot of fun, by the way. So the research was just a joy to do, and hopefully I captured that in the story of The Long Flight Home. Also wanted to mention too about pigeons. Pigeon fanciers are it's a popular hobby in Britain even today. People love pigeons in Britain, and they call them pigeon fanciers. And in World War II, there was actually a real service it was the National Pigeon Service. And it was a civilian organization that actually raised these pigeons for the military. And the National Pigeon Service was civilians, it was pigeon fanciers, basically hobbyists that just love racing pigeons. And they raised pigeons and donated them to the British services for purposes of the war. During World War II, there's something called the Dickens Medal, which I'll mention. I thought was something that was pretty extraordinary. The Dickens Medal, it's awarded in Great Britain for the gallantry of animals during World War II. And it was awarded 54 times And 32 of the recipients were pigeons, which is another something else. So something I came to love. I came to love pigeons when I wrote this book, that's for sure. I have a whole renewed respect for pigeons. I can't call them birds anymore. I call them pigeons, which is I referred to in the story, but just remarkable animals. Pigeons, it's still a little bit of a mystery about how pigeons, homing pigeons, are able to find their way home. There's two types of pigeons. There's really two-way pigeons and one-way pigeons. One-way pigeons, basically, if they have an innate ability to, if you drop them someplace miles and miles away, hundreds of miles away from their home, they'll find their way back to their loft. They have this innate ability to do it. And two-way pigeons is when you have food and water in two different places, and which was commonly used in the trench warfare in World War I, where they would have headquarters would have their food and trench would keep water, and they would be able to keep pigeons going back and forth, getting food and water. But scientists are just still debating how they do it. Some believe they have mental maps that they can find their way back home. Some believe they can actually sense the magnetic lines of the earth and find their way back home. And I just think that they're really smart. And that they have something unique about pigeons. Both the male and female pigeon raise their young. They're very communal and family oriented. And I just like to believe that they have a very strong sense of family and community. And that's one of the reasons why they're so attracted to their loft and finding their way home. So, but it was a pleasure to write this story. And I'd love to leave it up to a lot of questions from the group, and I can maybe elaborate on some of the things you're thinking. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to maybe some questions the group may have about the story itself, about the pigeons, about the characters.
Alan, if you can hear this, I can have a question here. Do pigeons live, and how long did these particular pigeons, would they live?
Yeah, that was a great question. I've had that question asked. They live for about, I think about 15 years is the average. During my research, I had a really hard time finding an average age for pigeons. It was really pretty interesting. But from what I can gather, I think a good long life for pigeons is about 15 years.
But kind of like a dog, I suppose.
Yes. I thought it would be just a few years. I was surprised it'd be quite a bit longer than that. But they do live a pretty long life. And they actually, they have a pretty well, and that's assuming that they do have a loft to live in. They're living in a nice environment where they're being fed and cared for. So that certainly helps, because compared to maybe what you would see maybe in a city where you see pigeons flying around parks and things like that.
Another question that comes up, and I don't want to jump in front of anyone, but how long did it take you to write this book?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It took me about 3.5 to 4 years to write The Long Flight Home. So it was a lot of research, and I have to thank my writers group, the Akron Writers Group. Just a wonderful group that I feel very grateful to be part of. It really helped me to be able to bring this story to life. I shared this story chapter by chapter with my writers group as it progressed, and got some great feedback about how people would react to the story. So I have to give some major thanks to the group for helping me bring this story to life. But about 3.5 to 4 years. I'm writing a book a year.
Wow.
I have some 2 other books in the works. One's going to be out that I'll mention. It's called Churchill's Secret Messenger. Will be released April 27th of next year. And then I have another book that's going to be coming out the following year. So I've been really busy. I went from writing a book every almost 3 to 4 years, now about every 12 months. So this has been a really big change for me. So I feel grateful to be able to write full time now. So.
Great, great. I had another question that was here. Pertaining to research, where would you say the oddest source of research that you came across? Like, what was the oddest location or place or resource, I guess?
Oddest location resource. Wow, there's quite a bit there. I think I would say there's two that really come to mind. One I'll bring up is the Ollie, one of the co-protagonists in the story. He's a crop duster from Maine who disregards U.S. neutrality and travels to Britain in a quest to join the Royal Air Force. And one of the interesting things that I found during the research is that there were about 240 U.S. pilots that disregarded the U.S. Neutrality Act. This is prior to us joining the war, prior to the bombing at Pearl Harbor.
Right.
That they essentially broke the law and faced, imprisonment by fleeing the country and going back. Many of these folks had British roots. They had family that were in Britain, and they felt a sense of family and obligation to try to help. So I thought that was very interesting, and learning about the stories. I had read a book, it was called Yanks in the RAF, and it was just a tremendous resource about the actual stories of these individuals, about how they got to Britain, about how they would, trek up through Canada, escape to Nova Scotia, and take a ferry or try to get on a military vessel and make their way to Britain. So some of those, that was really interesting for me. Another thing was the actual stories of the Blitz. During the research, I researched a lot about what was taking place. The scene of this story takes place in Epping, England, which is right within a couple miles of a Royal Air Force base, which was bombed heavily during the early parts of World War II. So there was, every night there was anti-aircraft fire, there was bombings, they're flying over Epping to get to London. So learning the personal stories that were taking place, I tried to incorporate some actual bombings that took place. One in particular, there was a bombing at, I think it was called Spriggs Oak Hospital, where there were a number of expectant mothers that were sent to the countryside, at least outside of London, to deliver their babies. And unfortunately, the hospital was hit by a parachute mine. So some of these things were very interesting for me to try to capture and bring to the story. So those are probably some of the couple that pop into my head right now. So.
But was this story, was there anything any fictional or anything that you kind of took advantage of the facts and added to that? Is that kind of where we're at, or is this all just delivered straight facts? Yeah,
I tried to use as much facts as possible. The National Pigeon Service, the use of the pigeons, the escape routes through German-occupied France, all those things. I tried to the use of the RAF planes and everything. I tried to make as real and as accurate as possible. However, there are some things that are fictional. Winston Churchill makes an appearance in the book. So, cool. It's when Susan is called as a member of the National Pigeon Service to a meeting in London in Churchill's underground war room, where there is a meeting between military and the National Pigeon Service in order to acquire thousands of pigeons for the military use. And to my knowledge, I could not find an actual meeting that took place in the bunker, but I couldn't resist giving readers a view of what it looked like in Churchill's underground war rooms.
Sure.
So that was certainly fiction, but I just couldn't resist bringing that to the story. So another thing was use of a truffle hog. During Ollie's stint in German-occupied France, he meets a woman who is a truffle hunter, and she has a pig named Louis. And this takes place in Arranes, which is in northern France, and truffle hogs are much more common in southern France. I just couldn't help but have a truffle hog in the book.
Exactly. Can you talk about the durability of these pigeons? I can imagine them flying through, like the post office, through rain, snow, and sleet, and hail, all that sort of thing. Like, how long would it take them to go from one place to the other? Were they expected, from one destination to the other? How long did it take? That type of thing.
Just, I was surprised to see how fast. It depends how far the distance is, of course. But pigeons can fly, I believe in my research, I'm trying to think, between 60 and 90 miles an hour they've been tracked. And they can fly as high as, I think, 30,000 feet, which I had no idea that a pigeon could get that high, where they would require oxygen. Yeah. So this is some of the scientific stuff that I came across. I'm like, really? I just had no idea that they could, and they've been, they could fly for hundreds and hundreds of miles away back to the loft. And depending on the distance, it would probably be several hours of a trip. I think this would be a several-hour trip for them, depending if they stopped. But again, there's no place to stop over the channel. I mean, we're flying from France, German-occupied France, across the channel to Britain. But it would be just a matter of hours before they would get back for this trip.
The distance from France to Britain across the channel would be approximately, what would you say?
I would say it's a few hundred miles away. I think from the book, I know we did a map from my publicist. We actually tracked how many miles it would be for Epping, but to this, I think it was maybe between 200 and 300 miles for this trip.
Did the enemy you would think they would catch on that these pigeons were being used and shoot them down, or was there anything pertaining to that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, Scott. They did catch on, and there's a couple of things that they faced. One is the Germans did catch on to these pigeons being dropped for intelligence, and so they tried to find them and dispose of the pigeons. They also used snipers to be able to shoot the pigeons when they saw a pigeon. They would try to shoot the pigeons based on recognizing a pigeon in the air. And they also began using falconry, where they would actually release falcons to go get these pigeons. And that's actually mentioned in the book. It's something that the pigeon Duchess, which is Susan's beloved pigeon, has to avoid in order to get back to Germany, back to headquarters. One other thing that they had to face was at the time the French were starving. I mean, the rations. It was very difficult times for the French, and part of the reality was that many of the French that would come across these pigeons were facing desperate times for food and survival for their family. So they were also faced, do I release this pigeon to go back home, or should I provide a meal to my family to live another day? So that was a reality of what some of these pigeons face. So they were not just facing, just
the enemy,
getting back home, or the enemy. They also had, the French themselves, the people that didn't, is this really going to help? And should I help my family feed the bellies of my children? So that was another thing they encountered.
What kind of messages would these pigeons carry, and how dependent were both sides of, from one destination to the other? How dependent were they upon them? Because I know there was other sources of communication as well, but what kind of things might they carry?
Yeah, these particular pigeons, and I'm going to speak to the pigeons that were dropped for Source Columba, and that was the operation to drop about 16,000 into France and Netherlands. This was very high tech, They put pigeons into a basket. It was like a woven basket. It looked more like a lobster trap than anything, with a parachute attached to it. And inside the cage, was the pigeon, of course, and the pigeon had a capsule, like a Bakelite capsule that was attached to its leg. And in the cage, they had paper, pencil, and instructions written in French, and that was it.
Wow.
It basically was just to entice the, please let us know, where the troops are, what's taking place. And it was up to, these pigeons would fly home to their lofts. And from these lofts, all this intelligence, all these notes where they were being shipped to British intelligence, like at Bletchley Park, to decipher, okay, which ones are real, which ones are maybe fake, which ones are, and try to come up with some sort of trend or something that they believe would be credible. If you get a chance, Bletchley, there's a lot of really interesting things online that you can research about Bletchley Park, and they actually have a pigeon exhibit. And if you Google pigeon chimney, you'll find all you need to know about this event where this one pigeon was found in the chimney in Surrey. The one thing I will mention about these messages is that these messages were not coded. These were just written in longhand, and they were sent. And this is what makes this one discovery in the Surrey chimney very unique, is that Bletchley curators indicate that most of the messages used for the source Columba were longhand written messages, not code. But they do know that it was a pigeon from 1940 during this operation, because of the code on the aluminum ring attached to the pigeon's leg. So it makes another layer of complexity, is because they don't understand why this coded message was even being used in the first place, let alone be able to crack it.
Wow. Is there any thoughts of turning this into a movie?
Oh, thanks. That would be wonderful. I'm very happy writing books. That's what I love. I mean, I feel honored just to be able to write a story and someone want to read it. So if someone would turn it into a movie, I'd be more than delighted. I think, my agent and publisher would certainly be delighted too, but I'm going to stick to writing books. And if that happens, that's wonderful, but that would certainly be an honor if that would take a place.
Any other questions? I'm kind of commanding the whole thing here. I'm sorry. Anyone else? Or any of the questions that you've been asked before, Alan, that haven't been asked yet that you might want to bring up?
I'll talk maybe a little bit about, I mentioned the two protagonists in the book. One is Susan, and Susan is works for the National Pigeon Service, and she believes that her beloved pigeons can somehow save Britain. That's her motivation. And Ollie is the crop duster from Maine that travels to Britain and is a quest to join the Royal Air Force. And you'll rather than maybe ruin some story for someone, but there's an antagonist that I'll talk a little bit about in the book, and it's a unique antagonist. His name is Lieutenant Clyde Bohr, and he is a flight lieutenant for the Royal Air Force. And one of the things that I found most interesting about him was I tried to create an antagonist that wouldn't normally be an antagonist. You usually have, the allies are working well together, right? So I try to come up with an antagonist that would make it difficult for Ollie in achieving his goals, as well as Susan. So I won't give away any insight to the story, but writing Bohr's character was one of the most pleasurable things about writing the book. It was a really fun thing to dive in and write about Lieutenant Bohr.
Is any of the characters based on yourself, people you know, family, anything like that?
That's a great question. I would say there's a character, Susan's father named Bertie. Her grandfather is lives with her in Epping, England, and they raise pigeons for the National Pigeon Service together. And he is like my father. I sort of emulated my father. My father was someone that was always positive. Nothing got him down. He always found look at the positive, and in the darkest of times, he would find a reason to, the good in something, that will to survive, that drive for hope. And that's what I hopefully instilled in Bertie, was some of the traits that I endear, that I really value in my father. So
You need more people like that.
Yeah, no kidding. And,
yeah.
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, and it's just, and during this book, Susan's parents, Susan is an orphan, and she lost her parents during the pandemic of 1918.
Okay.
So, and I had never, I didn't anticipate something like we're dealing with today. We're dealing with just extraordinary times, and now I'm often asked about that. Did you, but no, this was written years before this all took place. But the pandemic is brought into the story, and about her history and about what her parents went through in 1918. So, and now it looks like we're faced with that now, and it's something we're dealing with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other thoughts or questions from anyone else out there? I'm not seeing anything. Any other thoughts you have there for us, Alan?
Let me see. Well, first here's a question from Peggy. Oop. Just popped up. Let me see what it says here. Did the Germans ever use the pigeons to provide false information to confuse them? And yes, absolutely. And that's something that they did. I would love to be able to give examples, but during my research, it was mentioned that during Source Columba, when they dropped all these pigeons, that they had to try to sort through some that were basically intercepted by the Germans and trying to maybe manipulate things a little bit. So, but yes, they did give false information.
I don't have anything else coming in on my side. Do you have any other questions that are coming to you?
Yeah, I'll just I'll mention that one of the things in the book, and I mentioned this in the office note afterwards, is that it was just an honor and a pleasure to be able to research and write this story. I feel very fortunate to be able to share this story, because it's something I didn't know about, and I'm assuming that many people didn't know about the use of pigeons and some of the things that took place in World War II. And I hope this also honors the pigeon raisers in Britain, and as well as the people that suffered immensely during the Blitz on London during World War II. They were bombed for just many consecutive nights, and I believe there was about 43,000, if my memory is correct, men, women, and children that died during the Blitz. And it's something that I hope this, just helps remember the people that endured enormous suffering during this unique period in history.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, is there, if as people read this, as we read this, how can we get in contact with you if we have questions or thoughts or want to keep up with you? What are some ways to follow you?
Yes, a couple ways to follow me is you can go to my website, first of all, Alan Hlad, AlanHlad.com. And it gives updates on the book. There's a link where you can reach out to ask me any questions you'd like, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I love hearing people's thoughts, and it's an honor to be able to share anything any questions that you have. I would be happy to answer. Also, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under Alan Hlad. I have a unique spelling last name, so I'm pretty easy to find. I think if you go into even to Amazon and just type in my last name, Hlad, my book pops up. So it's a very unique last name. So,
as we're kind of winding down here, tell us about this world's most persistent cat.
oh, thanks. Yes, but Miggy is my cat. Miggy is, I just joke that Miggy is the most persistent cat, that he just does whatever he wants. He's now about 12 years old. He was a rescue, so we're not sure, but we think he's about 12 years old. And he likes to talk a lot. He's a very vocal cat and loves to be around people. And he's one that, like, if you're having dinner and he will jump up and you have to put him down. He'll jump up. He just doesn't. It's sort of a joke. We have friends and family come for holidays, and there's Miggy jumping on our table, and we just we try. I'm sorry. He keeps going out, jumps right back up. He just doesn't care.
That's sweet. That's
He's
sweet.
the world's most persistent cat, and we love him.
Gotcha. All right. Any final thoughts before we close out here?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and it's an honor to join you at the Perry Library, and for readers to experience a long flight home. And I'm looking forward to joining you in person. I know I was previously scheduled to join you in person, but with COVID, we've made arrangements to do the Zoom. Hopefully with the next book coming out in April, I'd love to be able to come out and meet you in person and join everyone there. So
absolutely, we'd love to. We'll connect to make sure that we get you out, and maybe we can get some people to, as they get the books, get them signed off. Since you would be right here in person, that'd be a great thing to have an author signing. All right, well, let me just indicate again that this has been Alan Hlad, and here at Perry Public Library. The name of the book is The Long Flight Home. Very fascinating. Can't wait to read that myself, the whole thing. Again, come visit us here at Perry Public Library. We are open for business. We have masks, and masks are required to buzz around here and peruse the books and DVDs and so forth that you're welcome to check out. Curbside pickup is also available, and don't forget our website, perrypubliclibrary.org, to find out about the more virtual programs and things that we have going on. Alan, thank you again so much for taking your time today to spend with us, and we look forward to seeing you in person this upcoming year.
thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure. Take care.